Welcome back to Critical and Curious Season 2 Keanu's. It's here, it's happening. We're talking about Matrix Keanu. As always, I am joined by Bob Thompson, and we are here at the SI Newhouse School of Public Communications at Syracuse University. And I'm excited to talk about The Matrix. You know, we spent 5 episodes going through the first 10 years of Keanu's career, but The Matrix is a key inflection point as we talk about who he is in the mainstream audience. There's no comparison here. We have 3 films, but we have 1 character. And I'm really looking forward both to your reflections of the film when you first saw it, or all 3 films, your reflections now, 20 years on, as we will be releasing this on the 20th anniversary, March 31st, the 20th anniversary of The Matrix. So let's jump straight into it, Bob. Welcome. Thank you. What are your thoughts on The Matrix?
I mean, I guess we have to really call this Keanu Reeves' masterpiece. Now, I'm using that phrase with a very wide sense of definitions, but if we've got Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, which really kind of establishes this character of that Keanu Reeves would play and then inflect throughout his career. If we've got his kind of highbrow moment in My Own Private Idaho, and then his big blockbuster with Speed, The Matrix is a trilogy, which, by the way, he hasn't achieved yet. He's about to with Bill and Ted, I think. Number 3 is going to come out.
Yep.
He's very soon going to achieve it with John Wick. But this was the first that he had a trilogy, which really had a sense of coherence in a way that I don't think Bill and Ted did. We'll see about John Wick. So if nothing else, this is his longest work to date.
Yes.
And it also has got, and oftentimes it gets, and we'll talk about this as we go on, there is a certain pretension to its, we don't get very far into the Matrix when we actually hear the line,
"You're my savior, man. My own personal Jesus Christ."
Again, as Bart Simpson would say, that's not subtext, that's supertext.
Yes.
I use that line 100 times in our conversations. Neo, Trinity, Nebuchadnezzar, Morpheus. I mean, we've got all this great kind of mixture of Western religious traditions, Christianity, Judaism, Greek mythology. But it all really kind of works, I think. I think this is one of those things that it's a movie better enjoyed with a bachelor's degree in comparative literature, maybe less so with a PhD in comparative literature.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. I like that. You say that it's his masterpiece. I think it's more of the culmination of his work. And that is, and I encourage our listeners to check out the website because I'm going to lay out this theory. As I was watching all of these films to date, right? So we've watched 10, 11 films to date. I'm seeing foreshadowing of Neo in all of these films. So that's why I mean it's a culmination. You know, he delivers the whoa line. Straight up. He delivers it for us.
Whoa.
And that harkens back to Bill and Ted. He speaks in, bookends on that sense.
And that was reasonably subtle. I really liked how that was done.
No, I thought it was well done. But as we think through all of these films, there's other, like I said, foreshadowing implications of what might come in Neo. I love the way in which payphones work as transportation devices, which was the basis of Bill and Ted, right?
And Doctor Who.
Exactly. When we talk about the sex scenes in My Own Private Idaho, those still strobes, the stylized representation of the bodies, we see that in The Matrix. When we look at Point Break, that running scene through Venice, that foot chase scene just screams all of the foot chases with the agents in The Matrix. In Speed, we have the train scenes. Every time he's on a train, all I can think of is Speed, when he's going down the elevator shaft and shoots so that he and Trinity can skyrocket to the top. The elevator is stopped in the basement, right? There's all of these points where I feel like not only are the Wachowskis attempting to mash up religion and philosophy and Baudrillard and the Bible and all of these things, they're also sensitized to the career that is Keanu Reeves. And there's a long list of actors that they were thinking, Will Smith apparently turned it down to do Wild Wild West. And they went with Keanu Reeves over Johnny Depp. It may not have been written for Keanu Reeves, but it sure feels like it.
Yeah, that makes me, okay, so I'm going to revise everything you just, those are really nice observations. It's the Wachowski brothers' masterpiece, because I think they have brilliantly, as you've just pointed out, and some of those I had not thought of, that running scene, you're totally right about that. So for Keanu Reeves, it's the culmination, it's what his career has been kind of leading to by mashing it all up. But the people that actually created it, Keanu didn't write this or directed it, obviously had a sense of Keanu Reeves' character up until the turn of the century, almost as complex as your sense of Keanu Reeves' character.
And I appreciate that, because we can see Buddy Keanu with his relationship with Morpheus and Trinity. And to be fair, any good romantic relationship starts with a buddy relationship, in my opinion. So we can see Buddy Keanu. We can see Cop Keanu as he polices the Matrix. We can see classic Keanu. I mean, it's a Bible story. It's a Messiah. It's a savior. The cues are there. There's thriller Keanu. That's just a gimme. And then, of course, there's romantic Keanu, where especially, I love the scene with Monica Bellucci from Dracula. The two scenes where she is featured. In Reloaded, where she demands that kiss. And the kiss, it's something so small as a kiss, but it means everything.
I want you to kiss me as if you were kissing her.
Why?
You love her. She loves you. It's all over you both. A long time ago, I knew what that felt like. I want to remember it.
And she, the simulacrum of the whole affair, what does it mean? What does it represent? How is that separated from where we came from? And then she turns around in Revolutions and is laying out in a super text fashion as to why Trinity is going to kill us all.
You are really ready to die for this man.
Believe it. She'll do it. If she has to, she'll kill every one of us. She's in love.
It is remarkable how similar the pattern of love is to the pattern of insanity.
Time's up. What's it gonna be, Merv?
I agree. There were times, especially by the time I got through the third, that I thought, why isn't this in the romantic Keanu category?
Exactly.
This is probably the best love story of the batch that we're going to look at. And the way it blends in the end to both a story of redemption of sin through death and sacrifice and a love story. The redemption story in the New Testament is pretty good. There's the Mary Magdalene and the Jesus and whatever, but it doesn't pull off some of the stuff that this manages.
On that note, Keanu has said that The Matrix is a love story in an interview with the Arizona Republic in 2003, acknowledging it's not just, to go back to our guest speaker, Lonnie Rich, from last time, it's not just a love story because it tells a story of love. It's a love story because it invites you to be emotionally vulnerable with the characters. And I had a conversation with another friend of mine who says, she's a total sap in movies and she always cries, but she laughed at the death of Trinity. And I've really been thinking about that, in that, why is that moment strange? Why is that moment uncomfortable? Because we know we don't always laugh when things are funny. Sometimes we laugh when we're uncomfortable. And for him to metaphorically watch her die while he's blinded, for me, it's painful to watch, knowing fully well that in between those two films, his girlfriend gave birth to a baby at 8 months who was stillborn, and then 2 years later, the girlfriend died. After they had broken up because of the baby, well, I don't know why but that is the common public discussion, that the stress ended their relationship. And then the girlfriend died in 2001 before they were supposed to start filming this. And then to watch him, as we've already talked about, River Phoenix dying during Speed, to watch that scene, it made me uncomfortable. And both in the extra textual narrative, but also in the emotionality of Keanu Reeves that we've already discussed, that seems over the top and absurd, but he delivers it with no eyes. And I haven't quite put my finger on what that means for him as an actor, what that means for us thinking about him as a man, as a celebrity, as a star. But there is something about that scene that I think is often overlooked in the public conversation of The Matrix.
I agree. First of all, unlike your friend, I did not laugh at that scene at all. I thought
cried.
there was nothing funny about that in the least. And maybe it's because we bring with it this extra textual information that you just pointed out. But first of all, the idea that for him to actually behold that would have been so unthinkable that the only way he can witness the death of Trinity is with his eyes covered. You know, a little kid, when horrible things happen, you cover your eyes.
Yes.
He has had that done, not metaphorically, but literally. His eyes are covered. You also point out the acting, and I also, this is one of my favorite parts of this whole trilogy, is when he is blinded. First of all, you take away one of the greatest assets of Keanu Reeves, which is his incredibly beautiful face.
Yes.
And his face is about as pretty in these movies as it's going to get.
Definitely prettier than John Wick when he keeps getting beat up.
Yeah, right. And so you fried the whole upper part of his face. You've taken that away by putting a big band around it, like he will probably wear in 47 Ronin, but it's down an inch lower over his eyes. So he not only has to act that without the asset of his face, but he has to act it without the asset of the eyes being the windows of the soul. I mean, you've got it covered. There's this Oedipus moment, and it's more than a moment. He's got that thing on for quite a while in this film. And to give someone one of the most emotionally charged, highest voltage scenes and make them play it without eyes, I think was a really clever choice on the part of the writers and directors, and I think it was brilliantly executed by the actor. I think that is a scene where stuff comes together really nicely.
I wished I had one more chance to say what really mattered. To say how much I loved you. How grateful I was for every moment I was with you. But by the time I knew how to say what I wanted to, it was too late.
I hadn't heard that people laughed at that. I didn't think it was. It's uncomfortable, as you point out. It's incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'll give this friend of mine the benefit of the doubt that it's not laughing because it's humorous, but laughing because there's just something, and she said so herself, there's just something that she hasn't been able to put her finger on. And so in thinking through that, the level of discomfort, I think, for me, that comes out in that scene, I could see how someone would react thusly.
So that laughing could actually be a tribute to its elevated artistic ambitions.
Exactly, which is something we do not expect of or allow Keanu to do. As we've already
you and
discussed.
I do.
Yes, we do. We as the American international viewing public. And if I could just talk a little bit more about that scene, just the entire back end, the conclusion of this film where our Savior sacrifices himself, the entire scene or set of scenes that are delivered with the post blinding, I think is really impressive as we think through the metaphors of specifically Moses, right? That they move through into this machine world. He can't see anything. She has to drive. Again, he gives over, right? He gives over control to her. And it's a humorous moment, but as we know with gendered norms, you know, allowing the woman to drive to come back to speed is not something that men on film are allowed to do, but he embraces. At the same time, they come to the machine world, and when they are being attacked, he tells her to go up. and they go up above the clouds, and for a moment she sees heaven before she passes. She sees heaven and he doesn't. And I feel like there's something very Moses about that, in that Moses was not allowed to enter
Had to be Joshua.
Right.
Yeah.
Was not allowed to enter the promised land, but he could see it.
Yeah, oh, that's very nice. Where does one start with that? First of all, I love how they bring in Moses and Oedipus and all this other stuff, and sometimes really obvious, like with the names, Neo, for example, but sometimes not. But they never jam it into a, parable, or I'm sorry, what do they call that, Pilgrim's Progress, where they name this stuff, where people are named Christian and sin and whatever.
Yes.
Because Moses, as I recall, Moses doesn't get, you're right, he sees the promised land, but he doesn't get to go there out of his own hubris. That's not so much the case, I think, with, it's almost with Neo. It's out of love and some other really complicated things, which I'm going to have to watch this thing about 10 more times to quite get to. But I do like how they merge this kind of, generational promised land thing with the idea of blindness. The old, I was blind, but now I see.
Yes.
That to really be able to see requires you to perhaps have once been blind. And the whole myths of when you're, not myths, probably truths, when you can't see, your other senses go further. It's almost as though, it's not almost, I think it is as though that Neo is continuing his journey on a raised consciousness to what we call humanity, the other side being batteries. And part of that required this typical kind of hero's quest where he's deprived of sight. By the way, it wouldn't be the first time in Western storytelling that someone is blinded for a while, nor would it be the first time that the blind then get to see again.
Right.
Matter of fact, we can talk about some fairly important works in the Western canon that deal with that. Here's the one thing that when I watched this the second time that I didn't get, and I loved this movie when I watched it in the theater.
Which one, all three?
All of them, yes. I liked them all. And I saw them all in the theater, and I made a point to do it. And I thought they were compelling and thought-provoking. And, like so much of that, those things that while you're watching, you think you're really thinking deep thoughts. Maybe an hour later, you come to your senses, but they give you that impression.
What's a little less than profundity?
It's like reading Hermann Hesse novels when you're 14. You just feel like you're whatever.
I feel deep.
Yeah, right. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just like crying at if This Is Us makes us happy, crying, fine. If The Matrix makes us feel deep, fine. If neither one of those emotions are authentic 24 hours later, whatever.
Talking about going to see them in the theater, I really just want to share with you the first time I saw The Matrix in the theater. I don't quite recall seeing the second two in the theater, although I know I did. But the first one, I was a freshman in college. I was not sober. And we went to the movie theater, and I was deeply affected by this movie to the point where on the walk home, I was thoroughly convinced that there was going to be an agent around every corner. And we were dodging like we were in the Matrix.
Wow.
And it really stuck with me. It took us like 20 minutes to walk 5 blocks because I was convinced there was going to be an agent. On that note, I wanted to go back and dress up.
Wait, that's the end of that story?
That's the end of the story. I used to have this really wonderful like gray and white fur coat, and it's faux fur. I wanted to go and put on shades and stand and cosplay outside screenings of the movie because it's such a joy. I found it to be immersive. And I think that is really key to what The Matrix offers, is it presents a world in the most beautiful post-apocalyptic dystopia, but it's a world that you want to be a part of, kind of the same way we talked about Point Break. It's like you're following the cop, but you want to be the criminal. You are following the story, and you know the Matrix is terrible, and you know the real world is terrible, but these people are so awesome, and they are fighting the good fight, and how can I be a part of that world? And I think that's what really spoke to audiences, was both that it is a reflection of the world in which we are living, as well as the world that we want to inhabit and the good that we want to do. And I feel like that's really reflected through Morpheus's glasses constantly.
Going back to watch this, when Keanu came out in that long trench coat, that he looks more like a 16th century Portuguese friar than he does a whatever else we're supposed to be in him. He's really got that kind of that look of a religious man, of a missionary, of someone you might find in Dejima in Japan, circa 1583. And that was cool, and he looks fabulous in that, and he moves fabulous in that, and the slow motion in it is balletic. It's almost like the Black Swan, the way the thing goes out like a skirt and everything. But looking at it the second time, I immediately thought of the trench coats of Columbine. And the trench coats of Columbine are also firing automatic weapons, which we see here as well. And The Matrix was released at the end of March of 1999. Columbine was April 20th. It was like 21 days after that. And I think in an unfortunate way, that cannot help color any subsequent. So in other words, that movie had exactly 21 days to be watched with the innocence of that.
To be fair, is he wearing a trench coat in 1 or is he wearing a trench coat in 2? Because that frock comes out in 2 where it's like perfect, high collar, no buttons. How does he have no buttons, right? The game changes. His costuming changes between 1 and 2. The scene where they go to save Morpheus, he is in an open black trench coat with like halters. So he's got like 3 guns around the waist, 3 guns around the thigh.
So you were also right, though, because when I referred it to the Portuguese friar,
that's reloaded.
Can I get back for a second on this
Please.
Columbine thing? There is this sense, and this is what I find some of the most unsatisfying, and even in action thriller unsatisfying, are the many battles he has with the forever multiplying Smiths. Smith, I always think, should be said in plurals. Many Smiths.
Many Smiths.
And for one thing, I guess, in getting to the Columbine thing, is that the fact that you can kill 1,000 Smiths and there's no consequence. There'll just be more Smiths to come up again. So the idea with these Smiths that there is absolutely no value to a specific individual life because they aren't even, are they life?
They're not people, right.
But still, we're watching humanoid forms being mown down one after the other. So ethically, that seems to be, its chronological date of release seems to have some issues. But also, simply from a thriller standpoint, I can understand when you're going off after all those machines and when there's something you can achieve. But those things with the Smiths, okay, you shoot a bunch of them, they come back. There's no rules to that game. It's almost like watching a bunch of 2-year-olds play with a Monopoly board and money. There's like no to me, the dramatic structure of those films, their biggest weakness is in that Smith's phenomenon. Right. But the trench coat, I still think, is worth pointing out that this is less than a month from Columbine. And I'm not convinced that those guys didn't watch this movie.
I'm certain they watched this movie. Having said that,
But they were in trench coats before this movie.
I think they referred to themselves as trench coat mafia before this movie.
They did. I
so
looked into
instead of this movie being a precursor, because much of the conversation around Columbine is usually around Marilyn Manson and video games. And having said that, this film is on the pulse of that cultural phenomenon, right? We're talking about goth punk. All the club scenes are that deep, we just lost the lead singer from Prodigy, right? That goth punk, 90s sentiment. Also, Grand Theft Auto, just mowing down bodies. I don't think that it existed at an innocent point 3 weeks before Columbine, but rather was drawing on the visual rhetoric of the late 90s that also impacted the perpetrators at Columbine.
Yes, I think that I certainly don't want to imply that the Matrix caused Columbine,
Right.
because I think those people were doing their trench coat thing long before that. And I think you're right, is that in that both Columbine, in its incredibly tragic and macabre way, and the Matrix, in its movie whatever
Magic.
way,
Yeah.
are reflecting a time at the turn of the century. And
Yes.
the turn of the century was as we're, I think, more and more beginning to understand, in time of incredibly cataclysmic change that I think these movies reflect.
Who is Keanu Reeves in this character, and what does he bring to this movie? These movies.
Yeah, it is interesting to watch these three in a row, how much time in these films go on without the appearance of Neo.
Yes.
Long scenes, long periods of time where he is, it's like watching the Academy Awards. The host comes out and does his opening thing or her opening thing and then disappears for like 45 minutes.
And even though he's the star, and we talked about this before, he's simply the point, the center point at which the rest of the story revolves around. And that is what Keanu is bringing to the screen over and over again.
And which gets us back to the whole idea of what he brings, I think, to the definition of a certain typology of movie star.
Yes.
Now, first off, I'm gonna, all these things I bring back to the Rosetta Stone, the movie of Bill and Ted. And once again, I have to say that and you've already pointed out, right down to the whoa, the catchphrase, but who is Keanu in these movies? He's kind of this everyday guy, sort of a puppet in the beginning.
A cog.
A cog in
Literally in the machine.
Matrix. That's quite that word. There's a lot of cogs in those movies.
We're all cogs.
But and he doesn't know. It takes him halfway through the first movie before he finally says, "I am Neo" or "My name is Neo." He doesn't want to be called, what's his name, Anderson?
Thomas Anderson.
Thomas Anderson, about the most
generic name
as you could get.
Yeah.
And his acting style, which I think a lot of people say it's just bad acting, I think it's not bad acting, which is so passive. So much stuff kind of happens to him. Falling in love happens to him. He embraces it, but getting called to be the savior of all happens to him. And that delivery, which is very different than Bill and Ted. Bill and Ted, he's doing this exaggerated whatever. But so much of what he did afterwards is this kind of character that, I hate to use the old cliche of everyman.
Right.
But
we talked about it before.
He's got that kind of everyman sort of thing where this stuff just keeps happening to him, movie after movie after movie, and he keeps responding to it.
Yeah. What I love is that it's conscious, it's aware, because you see the moment in the movie when he realizes it's his turn to act upon things. And he says explicitly, I don't believe in fate because I want to make my own choices. He says it over and over. But he sees that this world is acting upon him until that very moment in the first one where he has to decide to go back into the Matrix to save Morpheus. All right, that's when you see his entire character say, the world has been acting upon me and it is my turn to take action.
Stop. I don't believe this is happening.
Neil, this has to be done.
Does it? I don't know. This can't be just coincidence. It can't be.
What are you talking about?
The Oracle. She told me this would happen. She told me that I would have to make a choice.
What choice? What are you doing?
I'm going in.
No, you're not.
I have to.
The end of the whole trilogy is about the whole choice issue.
I am taking action. That conversation with Smith at the end.
You must be able to see it, Mr. Anderson. You must know it by now. You can't win. It's pointless to keep fighting. Why, Mr. Anderson? Why? Why do you persist?
Because I choose to.
Absolutely, he is an everyman, and absolutely things are happening to him, but he also knows that things are happening to him, and in order to respond to that, he chooses he makes active choices. It's not, oh, I just happened to save the world, which was Bill and Ted. Ooh, I just happened to save the world. No, now it's, I'm going to save the world. I'm going to save Morpheus. I'm going to fight Smith.
Right, and there always is that moment when, I mean, here he literally takes the new name on it. What was that movie we watched where the technology makes us roll our eyes? It was
Johnny Mnemonic?
Johnny Mnemonic,
Yeah.
And a lot of the other, if you watch The Net or all these, whatever. The Matrix is very clever. Part of it is it has the advantage that by the time we get to the turn of the century, a lot of the technology they're using is not that much different than what we're using.
Right.
And then for the older stuff,
Their cell phones are just a bit bigger.
yeah, but that wasn't the problem. It could be in other things. The other thing is that when they're using archaic technology, it was already archaic in 19. Yes. I mean, they're like you put pay phones and dial phones and phones with the fancy handheld whatever things.
And I think for me, it was the terminal windows, right? That green text. I feel like a lot of the visualization of the Matrix was based in outdated technology that was really only embraced by hackers, right? In 1999, very few people were coding in terminal windows.
Yeah.
And you weren't seeing that green on black screen anymore. But those who were in the know were still using terminal windows. So I think it's...
that's very interesting.
It's a really interesting balance between drawing on old imagery that will still be retained. I don't know how I'm going to connect this, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. The red glowing light of a sentient computer is Kubrick. And it's still there, except now they've got 20 eyes, right?
Yeah.
And so it feels current because they're not trying to be futuristic. It feels current because it's old technology made new.
And I think they achieved that in some really interesting ways.
So do I.
That whole the logo of them, those dripping numbers and everything. Even though that's technically old-fashioned, that has been so embraced as the brand of the Matrix that it will never be old. That's what the Matrix looks like.
Yeah, and I think because we're mentioning Johnny Mnemonic, I really want to bring it in here. Johnny Mnemonic was written by William Gibson, and William Gibson has said of The Matrix, he called the film, quote, an innocent delight I hadn't felt in a long time, and stated, Neo is my favorite ever science fiction hero, absolutely.
Wow, from William Gibson, no less.
From William Gibson, that, again, this is not a masterpiece. It is a culmination of cyberpunk. It is a culmination of goth punk. It is a culmination of video games. It is an brilliant 20th century pastiche at just the right time.
Yes, I agree. By the way, since you're reading from William Gibson,
Please.
Moses, if I could have flown, I would have made it into the promised land.
Neo can fly.
That's what I mean.
Absolutely. So then, okay, so who is Keanu's character in this movie? What does he bring to the character? Absolutely, this everyman narrative. He's asking the viewer, how you're a cog in the machine? Maybe things can go deeper. And, as we talk about the post-apocalyptic tween dystopic genre that is so popular over the past 10 years, Hunger Games, The Maze Runner, a little Harry Potter. We have this story again and again about this everyday person who doesn't understand their purpose in life. Turns out they are the one. And I feel that may have come before Neo, but when you're thinking about the earliest, biggest example of that, it is Neo. And the fact that Keanu Reeves could embody that so perfectly and invite all of us to want to live in that world with him and Trinity and Morpheus. And to be honest, my favorite is still Niobe. That is my favorite character in all of these films. She can fly like nobody's business. She used to be with Morpheus and now she's with she
yeah,
takes
I would
no
like to
guff.
know more about that.
Yeah. I think Niobe is hilariously, wonderfully awesome. And I'm not a big video gamer, but it really makes me want to play Enter the Matrix, which is a whole video game dedicated to her story leading into and through Matrix Reloaded.
Well, you're right about the adolescent fantasy. And of course, an adolescent fantasy we live throughout our entire lives. I don't know why we call it adolescent, but, and you said a little Harry Potter, a lot Harry Potter.
Yeah.
He starts out under the stairs.
Yeah.
And even the luckiest kid in the world who gets ponies for their birthday and whatever has at some point felt like they were being put under the stairs. And he, of course, becomes the boy who lived, the chosen whatever. I mean, this idea of being the savior of the world. Many psychiatric institutions are filled with people who take that seriously, but all of us, I think, carry some of that fantasy with us ourselves. And Neo pulls that off so nicely because he's believable as this. He doesn't seem like, any more than Harry did, like the likely guy that would be the savior, except for the fact that he is so pretty and he looks so good in those sunglasses.
To embody his character in Devil's Advocate, oh shucks,
Yeah.
am I the savior?
Yeah, right. So that goes back to your idea that this is the culmination of all these. I would, however, like to, and I suppose Daniel Radcliffe got a little bit to this, though. It would be fun to see a movie where the chosen one is not beautiful, is not, and we've had some
Isn't
examples.
that just Monty Python's Life of Brian?
Monty Python's Life, he's Rocky to some extent. By the time he becomes the chosen, he's pretty belted up. But anyway, the only thing that would make me look at Keanu Reeves' character as Neo and say he's the chosen is that, of course he is. How could anybody that beautiful not be chosen?
Absolutely. So then let me ask, what was your favorite Keanu moment? In 1, 2, or 3?
I'm going to go back to the scenes when he's blind. I know those bother a lot of people, and they were bothersome, but I think that's when that movie went into... for so much of it is just action. You can watch that film and you could actually go out and make a sandwich while they're battling the octopus machines and the whatever.
Sentinels.
And that's exciting enough, but after a few viewings, it's like, we know how this ends.
Right.
And there's a lot of those kinds of scenes. But I think those scenes, when he becomes blind and then after that, are where that really moves away from being a thriller or an action movie, or even this kind of biblical epic. By the way, do you listen to the music in this? The soundtrack. There are times I swear I'm watching, Ben-Hur or The Rose or something like that.
So I think my favorite, we could talk about my favorite Keanu moment, but my favorite scene or sequence out of all of these films does not feature Keanu Reeves, and that is the highway scene. It's not even the highway scene. It starts with, it's the whole 45 minutes where they go to the Merovingian, and the Merovingian delivers these massive philosophical questions about what is reality, what is free will, how do we program reality, and the wife is just sitting there rolling her eyes. It's from that moment where Morpheus gets on the elevator, turns to everybody who's about to get on the elevator, gives them a little shake of his head, all the way until Keanu flies out of nowhere and snatches Morpheus and the Keymaker off the truck. I watch that every time. I will stop whatever I am doing when it is on television and watch that scene. And it's Trinity on the Ducati. It's the evil twins, those morphing jellyfish dreadlock albino twins. It is the absurdity of the Keymaker. I love that scene because it's so much fun.
Okay, that's a pretty good choice, especially since my choice, right before he becomes blinded, Neo says, "I'm scared, Trin."
Yeah.
Somehow when your name is Trinity, being called Trin
just
takes you out of the moment.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel right. How does this character shape the public understanding of Keanu? So there's pre-Matrix Keanu, which we have been talking about all season to date, and there's post-Matrix Keanu. So what is that turning point for the public understanding of Keanu?
Well, I don't think this is a big continuity break by any stretch. I mean, you yourself have very, very eloquently stated how so much of this movie is almost like you could consider all of the other movies Keanu Reeves starred in as the first episodes of, this being the season finale kind of thing. So I don't think there's a continuity break. I think the importance of it was, for one thing, they were big blockbusters. A lot of people saw these films. Secondly, there were 3 of them, so they really allowed this character to develop more fully than we've seen any of his characters developed up until now. That's changing.
But again, he still has no backstory. Like, all we know about Thomas Anderson, and that's part of The Matrix. You have no backstory. Your backstory was always created for you. But we don't know anything about him except for the fact that he works at, Metacortex.
Yeah, Thomas Anderson, by the way, is the name of my accountant who does my taxes, which is perfect. That's exactly what he's supposed to.
Absolutely. In his boring suit, in his boring job, hacking computer crimes or doing computer crimes for money on the side. That's all we know about this character. And we watch him grow. It's effectively like watching him from birth. He's got his second birth. To death. We see his entire life because his entire life only, the entire life
outside the Matrix, only comprises what we see in the film.
Right. So he is his classic character with no.
Right. That's also
background.
not a continuity break. Right. So if you had never seen anything else that Keanu Reeves had done up to till then. Watch The Matrix, even just the first one, and you've kind of got a sense of what he represents in the firmament of American acting and American characters and all the rest of it. But I think he did. The Matrix was a delivery system to a lot more people than had seen him before, which, by the way, Toy Story is going to be. I suspect if we were on a college campus right now, we could probably walk out into the hallways right now and in 5 minutes find 5 people who have never seen a Keanu Reeves movie. Yeah. I am pretty confident of that.
John Wick's getting a lot of coverage.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
but having said that, to go from John Wick to Toy Story in the young public mind, I think is going to be a demonstration for a new generation of his breadth of character.
Yeah, no, that Toy Story thing is a big thing. I mean, we can't talk about it yet because it hasn't happened.
Right.
But once you hit, I mean, it's one thing to do Speed. It's another thing to do Matrix. It's another thing to have, and he's got a number of catchphrases attached to him. Keanu Reeves is by no means an unknown. But many, many, many people are called to do a Toy Story, and very, 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 very few ever get called to do it. Especially a Toy Story, which wasn't even supposed to happen. Wasn't 3 supposed to be the final story?
I believe so.
Doesn't it end with all the toys dead or something like that? I don't remember. Then again, Matrix 3 ends with Neo dead. Well, and we know how that sequel happens.
Right. The rumor has it that they're trying to make another, although the Wachowskis haven't stepped forward to say anything, and all the actors have basically said they're not coming on without the Wachowskis. But
well, you know how I'd do that if I were making that movie. It would be about Morpheus and Niobe, and forget, you don't need the rest of them.
Yeah, there's definitely discussions about a Morpheus prequel. But at the end, the Oracle says, the little girl says,
will we ever see him again?
I suspect so. Someday.
It ends with, to come back to, right, the scene between 2 and 3, they don't say to be continued, they say to be concluded, right? So the implication is that...
Yes, I love that you make that distinction. Yeah. I hadn't thought of that, but that's a big distinction.
It is, and that means we're only halfway through this movie. We need you to understand that. And we hadn't seen a movie do that, really. Like, admittedly, the Star Wars trilogy, they build on each other, but each story kind of ends. There's conclusion. This one says, no, it's not going to be concluded. Join us in 3 months. And at the beginning of number 3, I expect them to go, last time on The Matrix.
What I like, though, about you, the distinction you made is to be continued implies that it's this never-ending story. It could be renewed forever. There could be The Matrix 7.
In perpetuity.
To be concluded implies something which they don't actually do for 3. Or maybe they do. But to be concluded implies that they're going to end it. It's going to be concluded, not just continued. And of course it ends. And I do have to say the last, 10, 15 minutes, the Christian imagery does get a little much. He's splayed out in a extended arms figure. The music sounds like something that Bernard Herrmann could have written for it's got very much that, Last Temptation of Christ kind of thing to it. But then we get that line that you just cited, and the implication, of course, is that whenever anyone sacrifices their life for an entire people and an entire, world, in essence, they get one bonus, which is they get to come back. Neo has done that once before.
Yes.
Well, we could have...
He's already come back from the dead.
Yeah.
He has already
Which Jesus may have as well. We just don't have that version.
It's true. He has already raised Lazarus, right? That's the other thing,
yeah,
as he
and
brings
then some.
Trinity back. And
he's been tempted.
He's
gone through the most of what I learned in catechism. He's done.
Yeah.
But if that was a conclusion, one, what's up with Matrix 4? But the same could be said about Toy Story.
we
need to watch Toy Stories and Matrix in parallel, now that he's become the Kevin Bacon of the two.
Yes. We could definitely do...
We could do some stuff with that.
Yeah. Degrees of Keanu. There's a few quotes that I still deliver in class. One of my favorite, can we call out our colleague, Cornel West, for being... he's not our colleague, like our personal colleague, but, as an academic, being featured so prominently in this film, it's just such a joy to me every time Cornel West comes on screen. And the line that I deliver in class when I teach race and gender to students who have explicitly said, I don't understand that life. I don't understand that. I say every time.
Comprehension is not a requisite of cooperation.
The way in which we move through the world and the way in which we love each other does not necessarily mean I have to understand every decision you make. But rather, I appreciate, love, trust, and value you, to come back to Link and Morpheus's relationship in Reloaded, where Link is questioning Morpheus. He says, no, if you're going to be on my ship, you need to trust me. That there's so much humanity in this space that's driven by the fact that they are not machines. And for me, that is running through all three films, but is spoken so perfectly, again, by the architect in that last scene.
Just how long do you think this peace is going to last?
As long as it can. What about the others?
What others?
The ones that want out.
Obviously, they will be freed.
I have your word.
What do you think I am? Human?
That this idea that only
that's giving me goosebumps just hearing it read again. Yeah.
That it's humans that lie, it's humans that love, it's humans that do all of these irrational behaviors. And in those irrational behaviors, we don't necessarily have to comprehend to cooperate.
Right, and that Cornel West thing, if everyone had that stitched onto a pillow in their house, we'd all be a lot better off.
Absolutely.
When you bring that up, it is interesting how those relationships, the architect, the oracle, the humans, those are the things we've been struggling with for millennia. The relationships between God or gods and us.
You mean the Trinity?
And other, there's other whatever as well. But the Matrix becomes the complicating factor, because that line you just read that the architect said, that could have been uttered without the Matrix.
Yes.
That could have been uttered just about us here on Earth doing what we do, as could the Cornel West character quote that we were just talking about. In some ways, by the end of this, and I say again, I love these three movies. I was less enchanted watching them at pushing 60 than I was 20 years ago, but I still like them a lot. But by the time you get to the end of the third, you almost think, do we even need the Matrix? You could cut out enormous parts of the epistemology of these films and still have some really interesting films. But the idea of the Matrix is the one that has caught on and penetrated the culture. You can't go a week without someone saying, I feel like I'm in the Matrix or whatever. The Matrix has become a part of the vernacular that has totally transcended these films, but will forever keep them as part of the canon.
You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
The way in which red pill has been appropriated in our current culture, especially in digital spaces where there's a whole red pill community. And that red pill community argues that there is a liberal matrix that has been pulled over all of our eyes, when in reality, if you knew the world, you would know that gender is biologically determined and men are inherently stronger. And all of these kind of conservative, traditionalist gender roles is what red pill is. And I'm so beyond, it's beyond my comprehension, and I don't want to cooperate. But, you know, the red pill culture basically says that the past 50 years where people have been trying to pull back the curtain of patriarchy, the curtain of white patriarchy, the curtain of power relations, that 50-year curtain has apparently, is somehow, I don't know, that 500 years of gender relations has somehow been changed so sufficiently that the liberal understanding or the more nuanced understanding of gender relations is the matrix. And I can't quite process that. And I'm curious because I have not seen anything about the Wachowskis, who both transitioned after this film. I have not heard about the actors or the producers talking about their opinion on how red pill has been appropriated by individuals seeking to retain and re-embrace male patriarchy that frankly has never really gone away, but they claim has.
Yeah, well, that's pretty complicated.
Yeah.
And there's so many temptations. Red pill, blue state, blue state. I mean, there's all these, and for that matter, Alice in Wonderland, the pill that makes you big, the pill that makes you small. And I think it all depends on who you are, whether you think the one pill, I mean, in any case, I think we can call these pills cultural right. Points of view. And for someone who believes in the last 50 years of consciousness raising with regards to, let's just say, gender, that is an escape from the Matrix.
Yes.
For someone who doesn't believe in that, it is the Matrix.
Yes.
And that's where we get into whether we really take Cornel West's little statement, to heart or not. Is that one of the things that we're struggling with now is you've got vast amounts of the population who think we're the Matrix and they're the real world.
You mean us in our libtard ivory
yes,
tower?
And vast amounts of us who think we've escaped and they're in the Matrix.
Yes.
And there is no, you can put a substrate in a Bunsen burner, as you know well, Dr. MIT, and if it burns a certain color, it's copper or it's whatever.
Right.
You can't put this stuff into a spectroscope or whatever they call them and say, oh no, that's the Matrix and you're right. You could argue that many people every single day on CNN, on Fox News, on MSNBC, are essentially arguing one subject, which is real and which is the Matrix. One pill is MSNBC, the other pill is Fox, CNN tries to play it all, but we're playing out that post-movie thing on a daily basis, and it just so happens that movie seemed to really nail that. Because I think many people think these things can't both be true. One has got to be a lie. One has got to be something, a big thing of wool that has been pulled over everybody, and we're the ones who have escaped. And The Matrix gives us such a wonderful metaphor of that. They've literally escaped. They're no longer plugged in and all the rest of it. And it's why revisiting these movies in 2019, 2020 is you're able to see things in them that you would have never thought of when you watched them in 1999 or 2003.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question that I hadn't postulated, right? We don't have a shared reality. We don't have a shared matrix, and we don't have a shared real world. And how do you save somebody from something if you can't even agree on what we need to save each other from?
That is exactly the center of our cultural existence right now. And then it gets even further. All these people that are in the Matrix, they're plugged in, they're lying there. Yes, they're batteries or supply, whatever they are. Do all those people actually want to exist? The very fact that is what Morpheus and Trinity and all these other folks are operating in, which, by the way, seems like a kind of a grim existence.
They're eating amino acids and vitamins in a slurry.
Is that real? Well, I mean, this movie, in the end, by the time it's over, really asks you that, okay, are they really in reality and they've escaped? Or is the Matrix how we were created?
Right.
And put it this way, escaping from the Matrix is a lot more dangerous than just staying in it.
Clearly.
If I were an actuary, I would recommend life insurance for the people in the Matrix, not for the people outside of it.
Yeah. I have a couple final questions for you, but before I get into those, do you have any other key quotes that you really wanted to mention or draw on? And of course, I asked this question because I have one. And also something that I say in class from the Oracle.
What do all men with power want? More power.
That line also demonstrates how we think about what our matrix is. What is our pill? What is our blue pill? What is our red pill? And how are they not shared? The question comes down to who had power, who has power, who wants more power, who wants to pick up power, and if you are have power or are powerless, that is going to impact the way in which you see the world.
Yeah, it's political science.
Yeah.
My favorite quotes, I suppose, why do you persist at the end? Because I choose to. I mean, that's philosophy 101 back to the old free will argument. Toward the very end, the big boss, it is done. Which sounds vaguely familiar. When have I ever heard that before? Like verbatim from the cross kind of a thing. But then I think my favorite is Trinity, where she simply says, "Kiss me once more," and dies.
If it's not a romance movie.
Yeah, I mean, that line alone.
So then, one question I have for you before we get to our final question is The Matrix Reloaded, or The Matrix Revolutions?
Which is my favorite.
Which would you watch? If you could only take one, which would you watch?
Well, okay, better yet would be if someone were to ask me, I'm dying tomorrow, I want to watch a Matrix, which one should I watch? I would say the first Matrix.
The first one, yeah.
However, wait, I may take that back. Because if they watch the second, it would give them some hope that maybe even though they're dying tomorrow, it may not be the end.
It may not be. Although one might argue that the third does that, right?
That's what I mean, the third.
Yeah.
But I think I would say, because the first really lays out the philosophical foundation that made those other movies a lot of fun to watch.
The first is a discrete entity.
Yeah, if you watch those second and third without the first, I don't think you'd be nearly as impressed with
And can you watch the second without the third and the third without the second?
I mean, in many ways, the question of which one do you like better is the most challenging of the episodes of The Wire. I constantly struggle, which single episode do you show to students who've never seen another one? And I have not solved that problem yet. Episode one are boring. They're setting stuff up. The best episodes, they're not going to understand what goes on.
Right.
So I'm going to go with Matrix 1. But even as someone who's seen all three of them, I think I'm still going to go with Matrix 1. How about not you?
I really enjoy Matrix Revolutions. And, I don't know what it is. I think, like I said, the highway scene, the Merovingian, it's the blending of advanced philosophy and action, right? So the first one, there's some good action in there, but it's intro philosophy. The second one is like advanced philosophy, and they're kind of embracing more CG, which I despise CGI Keanu in the, what is it called? The Burly Brawl with the 50 Smiths in the playground. The CGI Keanu is just too, it's just too blatant. Like suddenly we go from watching a movie to watching a video game. And then we go back to watching.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you get rid of the Smiths entirely from these movies, and I wouldn't object to it.
Really?
Well, that may be a little excessive. But.
And then I guess my last question for you before we call it a day is, what's your hacker name?
Oh, you warned me you were going to ask this, and I didn't prepare it. Fish and chips.
Fish and chips.
And if I were to explain that to you, I would have to kill you. No, it's because I really like fish and chips.
Yeah? Oh, I thought of it too. I found like the hacker.
Oh, by the way, it's fish and chips, no apostrophes, but no A or D between N.
Right.
That's important.
Like in and out.
Yeah.
The lazy one is always doctor, right? Like if I was a hacker, I would like to be called doctor. I feel like I worked really hard for that title. But if I was a hacker, I probably wouldn't be a doctor.
I can't wait till what you're going to say to this.
I don't know. I guess it would be the librarian.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I would like to be called like the architect, the oracle.
Yes, no, that's librarian. Perfect for you.
Yeah, the key maker.
That's so much better than mine is.
There's so many. The programs have the article in front of them, whereas the people don't have articles. And I feel like if I was a hacker, I would probably embrace being a program.
So wait, how would I have to be the fish and chips? That wouldn't make any sense.
I mean, you could do whatever you like. It's the Matrix. You can.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, you could code your own world, just like the train maker says. I made this place. Down here, I'm God.
I used to love Arthur Treacher's Fish and Chips, and it's almost completely out of business. And if I were to create a Matrix, that would still exist.
That would still exist. The Arthur Treachers. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for talking with me, and thank you so much for revisiting, reliving, reloading the Matrix movies.
That was fun. What's next week?
Next week, we are talking about teammate Keanu.
Oh, that'll be even more fun.
Yeah, so we'll be talking about The Replacements, which I recall quite fondly, and Hardball, which I believe has a Razzie nomination. And of course, as always, a special thank you to our teammate, producer, Lizzie Goldsmith. Thank you, and join us next time.